Hi there, Shanna Cramer here with Creatively Uncorked. Today we are going to be painting Daisy Blues. This is a nice, fun painting and it's easy. I would call it a level 1 out of 5 in difficulty. We've got some basic colors here, just a nice little blue, a white. I'm going to use some umber, brown, and some nice sparkly gold. And we might maybe add a little bit of a touch of black in there as well. So one of the things that makes this painting so much fun is because we get to do splatter painting. And the original was painted outdoors where it's safe to do splatter painting. But if you're in an area where you can't get paint all over the place, then I'm going to try to show you a nice, clean way to do splatter painting. But just so you know, there's no real clean way to do splatter painting. There's no way to avoid getting paint everywhere. So if you aren't in an area safe enough to get paint on, then just don't do it. All right, onward. I'm going to have my reference photo here nearby, and when I do the video, I will have it up in the upper corner so that you can see it and follow along. A couple of the supplies that we'll be using today. We have a few paintbrushes. These are nice old ratty brushes, pretty worn, as you can see, a little short bright, and then a big bristle. And these brushes are about perfect to get all this nice texture going on in there. So I'll keep those nearby. I also have my glass of water, my mixing palette, and my towel. I'll set this aside. Okay, so we'll start out with, and this is Phthalo Blue that I'm using. And I might need a little more than that, but I'll wait and see. White. Little bit of umber. And to get a really, really dark color, you'd mix your blue and your brown together. Gold. And that was a lot of gold. And then I'm going to wait with the black. I'm going to decide later if I want to use black or not. Okay, so let's start with my background. I have my big blue bristle brush. Go ahead and swish that around in the water. Dab it off on the paper towel so you don't have too much extra water in there. You don't want it to be dripping. And then we'll pick up a little bit of blue, a little bit of white, just a tiny touch of white, a lot of blue. And I'll start brushing that right onto the canvas. Do that again. I'll be doing that a few more times actually until I have the entire canvas covered. And if you can see here my lovely unicorn in the background that I'm painting over, I'm using a re-gessoed canvas, which is just fine. So that's one way that you can reuse your canvases. You can use gesso, which is very similar to Cramer, and you can just coat your canvas and just repaint it. One thing about regessoing a canvas is you're almost never going to completely cover the image below it. Don't worry about that. Your paint will probably cover it, so it's really not a big deal. Okay. Trying to hold the canvas down here, it's kind of clicking a little. Actually, I might pause the video for a moment, make a little bit of an adjustment. I think if I put that under my canvas, it'll make less noise. Because I don't know about you, but I really don't like hearing all those noises on the video later. Okay, did you see that? That's what I just did there. I just took also a little bit of brown and just threw it in there with my blue. And I'll get some really dark areas in the background. One thing about dark areas in the background is when you add your gold later, the gold is a metallic paint, so the gold will show up much better if it's on a dark background. The canvas that I'm using today is 11 by 14 inches. There we are. So now I've got my background entirely covered with paint. You can throw in any extra variations you may want. But once your paint starts to dry, stop working on it. You have to walk away, let it dry completely, because once your paint starts to dry, if you just keep going, you might get some unintended textures. So we're just going to go on ahead and let this dry. I am going to blow dry mine. You are welcome to do the same, or just hit pause and then push play again when we're all ready to go. All right, here we go. Our background is dry, and we'll start throwing in a little bit of texture in there before we move on to our flower. We could do texture after the flower, but I think it makes a little bit more sense to do it now. You can see we've got some really nice, fun, rough areas in there. We've got some white layers, some gold layers, and I'll show you how to get that texture. It's best done with a really old beat-up brush. So I'm just going to take my old beat-up brush here. Yeah, and I did move my paper towel down to below my canvas just because it seems to be a whole lot easier, and I honestly can't believe I never thought of it before. So, drying off my brush. All right, and then I'm going to pick up a little, now here's the trick. See what I'm doing? Edge of my brush, picking up just a little tiny bit of white. So now holding my brush flat, just a little bit of paint on it. Look at that texture. Pick up a little gold. Even pick up a little blue. Ah, let's go back to white. Isn't that lovely? Let's see, I'll go back to a little gold. Just wipe off your brush a little there. We want a dry brush, so don't dunk it in the water, but just wipe off the excess paint. There, pick up some gold. Scribble that on with the edge of your old brush. And if you use a new brush for this, it's going to become an old brush very quickly. Just so you know, this is a technique that's very hard on your brushes. So another reason to have some old brushes around. I know it's tempting to just throw them away once they are used and abused and starting to fall apart, but you can just tape them back together and just keep right on using them and get some different techniques and different textures out of them. See, I'm going to add a little bit more color. See if I can get that a little darker in some areas. Just like how this texture is looking right now. Sticking to the edges mostly because I'll have a big flower in the middle. I don't need all that texture in the middle. Ooh, layers and layers of texture. What a fun one. You see how dark that color gets when you mix your blue and your brown? Quite lovely. All right, wiping that paintbrush off again. And I've got some really good texture on this side. See if I can kind of even it out a little. Get some interesting things happening over on the left side as well. Very nice. Go back to a little bit of white. Oh, that's a fun one. Fun texture. Another thing that can contribute to the texture is using an old canvas. So if you notice when I started here, I was painting over an old painting, and the layers and layers and layers of paint will build up, and each layer will maintain its texture. So by the time you have a few layers on there, you're going to already have texture when you start painting. So then when you get to doing a fun texture-y painting like this, it just all contributes to it. Okay, so I'm going to stop there with my background. And at this time, it wouldn't be a bad idea to dry the canvas again, or to give it a few minutes, walk away, take a break, let it dry. So that's what I'm going to do. Hit it with a hairdryer. All right, so now we have our daisy. So I think to start out with for my daisy, I'll be starting with the center. I'll be adding some petals and adding some texture as we go. So to do that, I'll go back to my little brush. Just dunk that in a little bit of water. I'll be picking up some blue. Oh, dry it off if you need to. Picking up some brown, I mean. And then I'll just put my center. Okay, now this is just the base layer. We'll be adding many more layers, no big deal. Pick up a little bit more of that watery brown there. And I'll be adding some petals. One thing that I like to do with the petals, just to help simplify, because if you're not really sure how big the petals should be, where exactly they should be, how many there should be, think of it as a clock. Not a digital clock like an old style analog clock, the kind with hands. So when you make a petal, make the first one at 12 o'clock. Make the second one at 6 o'clock. Now I'm just making these petals just kind of bow out and then come in. They're just a little bit pointy. For now, they're a little bit pointy. Daisy petals are nice and rounded on the end. We'll get to that. So we've got 12, 6, and we'll do a 3 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, 1 and 2 o'clock, 4 and 5. I bet you know what's coming next. Just keep right on going all the way around the daisy. There. Why am I using brown for that? Because it doesn't matter. This is just a base layer. We're going to be going over this and over this with so many other colors. All right, so I kind of like the look of this. Now I'm going to dunk my brush in a little bit of white. Actually, let's wipe that off first. Wipe all the excess paint off your brush. And then pick up some white. And then I'll just pick a petal here. So what I'm doing is just, and it was a dirty brush to begin with. I didn't clean it. All I did was wipe the old paint off. Then I just pick up some white and just follow along that petal shape. And you see what's happening? Just a couple of drags of paint across of there. And now I'm ending up with some underneath texture showing through. I'm getting some blending going on where that brown paint is still wet. And that's exactly the look I'm going for. So now this time you can easily round out your petals a little bit. If you want to round out the ends of your petals. If you'd like to leave them pointy and sharp, you can absolutely do that too. The only trick that I want to kind of point out is, as a good idea, is don't overblend. Put the paint down and move on. So I'm just doing a couple of few brush strokes here, just dropping some white in, slightly blending that with the brown. Let the background show through. This is a little bit of an abstract technique and can be a little bit tougher to do, especially if you're the type of a person who has to have everything exactly perfect. You want your edges all to blend nicely. You want everything to be beautiful. For that, I would recommend trying out a dot mandala. You can find that video on our channel as well. Or if you're on our Creatively Uncorked Insider Facebook group, we did a live dot mandala, and you can find the recording of it in there. Okay, so there I go, still adding my petals. Just lightly dragging. Dropping in some white paint. And like I said, we're still working on layer 1 here. So don't you worry if you're not happy with it right now. And I'm just kind of randomly going up, doing one petal here, one petal there. I'm not going around the clock making petals because it would just be too even that way. At least this way, the paint is drying at different speeds. So some of the paint is going to be drier than other paint as we go around. And that's just going to help give that texture even a more random feel. There we are. And that's our final petal. Stop. Clean the brush. Already, I like the way this one is looking. Let's take a look at our reference photo here, which you have on your screen, I bet, but I don't. So there's my reference photo. So we've got our nice background in there. We've got our blue background texture, which is lovely. We've got our petals, which are really starting to look like the same petals. One thing that you can see that's different already is these have some depth. They've got a little extra color thrown in there here and there. They've got the dark edges. We'll be doing that as well. And we've also got some of that really bright gold. We're also going to add some texture to our center. Okay, first thing we want to do though is put that brush back in the water so the bristles don't dry out. We don't want to let paint dry on our brush. That will ruin your brush as well. So I'm just going to give this a quick blow dry and then we can move on. How can you tell if your paint is dry? Well, you can stick your hand in it, sure, that's one way, but then you'll leave fingerprints if you're wrong. So if you just kind of look into the light, if you can see really shiny spots, you can tell then your painting is still wet. If it all has a nice matte look to it, then you're probably safe. So next I want to fill in a little bit more of the center of my flower. So I'm going back to that small brush that we were just using, giving it a good rinse. Wipe that off. Okay, and now I'm going to go into my brown and actually a little bit of blue. So here's my really dark color, my brown and my blue. Now this is a nice dabbing motion, just a gentle little dab, dab, dab. And we're just going to right around the circle of that center. I think a little bit more on the brown side than the blue. There we are. And that is also going to give us a daisy texture. I'm not going to go overboard on that right now. I'm going to let it be right where it is and add some dark areas to my petals, to the edges of my petals. So again, I'm just taking a little bit of that blue, a little bit of the brown, mixing them together. And now I'm going to have a very dark color. This is a color that I often use as a replacement for black because black can be kind of color absorbing. And so if you want a really colorful painting, I generally will avoid black just so I don't have any dead areas of color. So this, again, I have the brush completely sideways. I'm laying it down almost flat and just kind of giving a little scribble. Look at that texture. Initially, it might look like a mistake. Let it be, let it go. This is adding beautiful, beautiful texture. This is one case where I would recommend, because generally you're right-handed or left-handed, and this little swooping motion is going to be a lot easier to do, you know, in one direction only. So here, if you want to rotate your canvas, do it. Okay, so I'm just going to turn. Same thing there. I'm just adding a little bit of a dark area. And again, if I'm painting too fast, you want to pause and catch up, just hit the pause button. Nice and easy. Okay, here's another little dark area in there. You can add some variation to your color by adding more brown or more blue. So this one, last one I did was more blue. So this time I'm adding more brown. You can have a little bit more variation in there. So I'm going to go right along this one. That's nice. Okay, so I'm also going to go up into here with that little bit more of a browny blue. See, now we're really going to start getting some interest. So when you're deciding where you're going to go next, kind of do it in a way to keep bouncing around the canvas. So go here first, then there, then there, then there, like, and just kind of fill in as you go. Don't be overly exact about this. Don't keep repeating the same shape over and over again. It'll look a little bit better if you can be a little bit more random. There we go. So maybe now I need some color down in this area. I'll wipe off some of that blue, go into some brown. And see the difference when you change colors, blue to brown? Now this ended up being a background petal. Unintentionally, but that's what happened. So background petals, you can add a little more darkness to. There. And if you cover up a foreground petal, don't worry, we'll come back with lighter colors over that. But overall is just going to give everything a nice depth. There. Abstract paintings always look so easy till you get going on them. Like you might have a plan in your head of how things are going to go. but it might end up doing what it wants to do instead. And to heck with your plans. But as long as you end up with something you like, then you're good. That's all you really need. So I need something else in here. So maybe some blue. That's nice and bright, isn't it? That's nice. I'll add some bright blue areas. Barely any paint on the brush. Almost no paint on the brush. Just lightly dragging it over a few areas. But I don't want, see when it gets down to zero paint, then it's picking up the brown that was in the brush before, and I kind of want to stick to the really bright blue for now. Yep, that's nice. A few splashes of blue right up in there. Right along. Yeah, that one's got it, this one. And a little bit down here. I think a little bit right out in here. There, now I've got a good even area of color all the way around. I'm seeing a lot of heavy darks right in the center, so I'll go ahead and brighten that up next. And you might be looking at your reference photo, but I've stopped looking at it because my iPad keeps falling asleep. So I'm just going with the flow here. All right, next thing I'll do, let's see, dry off the brush. Even if you have paint on your brush, you can still tap it on your paper towel or your whatever towel you have and just get some of the excess water out. And if you do it that way, it'll usually leave your paint behind. Okay, kind of lightening in a circle here. Just some gentle taps. There. Okay, I am going to be coming back in with my gold and adding some gold, but I think while I have that bright, bright, bright white that I'm working with, I'll just pick up a little bit more. And where might I want some bright white? So I've got a background petal in here, so I'm going to want some bright white on that foreground petal. Give it some good contrast. There, a little bit over that blue, because that blue is getting a little too powerful. Ooh, look at that. That really brought that edge to life, didn't it? I'm almost out of white, so I'm just going to take another drop more. And where else can we give it a good powerful punch? Right in here. Nice and bright. A little bit more. Let's see, I want to brighten up some of my ends, some of my edges. There. See, and I'm just dragging this brush lightly right over the top, and that gives me even more texture. See this one. And what I'm doing here is just picking out what ended up being my foreground petals. Foreground petals would typically be the last ones that I painted. Way back at the beginning, when we were just deciding where to paint our petals. Yeah, looking pretty good. Give this one a little punch it up with some brights. Lots of texture in there. And then I want to go back over this one a little bit more. Got a lot of texture in there that first time through. I'm just evening it down. There. Don't want to overblend. I kind of want to keep the texture that I have, but what I'm trying to do here is just tie the look all together. Keep it a little bit similar. So that petal, I think I'm going to have to come back and add some more blue or something to. This one as well. This one, I kind of like that big blue spot. Almost done with the white. And maybe just a touch on the end of this one. Give that one a little blend out. And if I add a little bit of blue right now, what it's going to do is blend with my white and become a light blue. I don't mind that at all. In a few little spots. Yeah, okay. Okay, I'll stop there with the adjustments and then pick up some gold. I'll start out by adding gold to the center of my flower and then work my way out from there. And this gold already is making a huge difference. Adding metallics to a painting is a really nice way to bring it to life and just make it pop no matter what it is. Just the metallics have to be used kind of in the right way. And the way to get your metallics to show really well is to put them over the top of dark colors. So right now I've got, make the center a little bit bigger. I've got some dark areas, I've got some bright areas. And where my center was really dark, you can see the gold is really starting to pop. This gold is one of the more subtle metallics. It's just not quite as shiny as the others, but it has a good color. See, that's really bringing the warmth into the painting now. There, that's nice. That's some nice big chunks of gold there. There, and this is also picking up some of the color that we had added into the background. Don't go over the whole thing, just a few touches of gold here and there, that's all you need. Come way out of these edges. There. That's really making a difference. So much more than you would expect. Kind of ties everything in, ties it all together. Just because I have a little bit of extra gold. See, I'll just bring that into the background in a few spots. Another way that'll help tie the daisy into the background. And make it look like it's all meant to go together on the same canvas. Which of course it is, right? There, can add a little bit. A few other streaks of color. I don't want to go overboard and cover up my beautiful texture in the background there. Just kind of bringing back some of the vertical streaks that I had started out with. And again, just kind of using up some extra paint on my palette. And I think that is probably close to enough of it. Also bringing it back into the blue shades. Now my center of the flower, I think I want that a little more warm, a little more brown. Brown is a nice warm color. So adding a little more brown will warm it up nicely. And I know it's hard to see, but I'm just tapping straight onto the painting. Here, I'll tilt it like this. And you can see I'm just straight onto the painting. Just tap, tap, tap. It's just going to warm it up nicely. There, taking my colors out from my center. Like I said, just this will just tie it all together. Don't go overboard with that though. All right, a little bit more light color. This is just a tiny, tiny amount of paint. Tiny, tiny. And then just gentle, gentle little taps. There, now we're getting that daisy texture back. There, very nice. Little taps straight onto the canvas. Okay, I am liking the way this daisy is looking. I think I'm going to leave it like it is. Let's see. All right, I did tell you that I'd show you some easier splatters, so I'm just going to take my little brush, throw it back in the water, and now I'm going back to my bigger brush. So first you want to mix up some paint, and I'll go with my white here because I have a lot of it. Well, not a lot, but more than some other colors. Now I'm mixing water with my paint. It's going to be more water than paint. If you do this, if you shake your brush with loaded with paint, it should not be drippy, but it should be very watery. So now I've got all that paint soaked up into the brush right now, and I'm going to turn it into kind of a toothbrush. So holding onto the bristles, and if it's dripping, you have too much water. Okay, I'm just going to do it over the top of my plate once. Run your finger back over the bristles, and then you get some splatters, but you also might get some drips, and that's what's happening. So I'll try from up here. Just a little bit. Get down a little closer to the canvas, and you'll get a little bit more splatters. Not so bad. Loosen up on the bristles a little bit, and you'll get some bigger splatters. Okay. I don't want to go overboard on this because I don't want to splatter my iPad. Okay. There, just going to cover it up with a piece of paper. Maybe that'll help. And when we do this in the studio, we just kind of let people go to town. Everything in that space is covered with paint anyway, so we just don't worry about it. Here though, we're not in the studio right now. We're in my house. A little bit different story. A lot of it's covered with paint, but also I don't really want my electronics covered with paint. Recording, as you can imagine, I'm surrounded by electronics. Well, I kind of like the way that's looking. That is a pretty nice splatter after all. Like I said, you can't stop the paint from going where it wants to go, but I'm going to stop the painting here, get this place cleaned up, and move on. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for watching Blue Daisy. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you post your painting. I'd really like to see what you do. If you have any suggestions for additional upcoming paintings, let us know. We are going to have this library filled in no time, so you can come in and watch paintings whenever you want to. Thanks for watching. This is Shanna Cramer with Creatively Uncorked. Till next time.